Commander Velthar stood in the docking bay of Station Meridian, watching the human ship approach through the viewing window. The vessel was smaller than he expected, with clean lines and bright markings that read HSS Taijin along its hull. After 200 years of service in the Galactic Collective, Velthar thought he had seen everything. But humans were still new to the galaxy, and his superiors wanted to understand them better. The Quarians, Velthar's people, were known throughout the Collective as the best peacekeepers. They were logical, calm, and most importantly, they could not feel fear. It was bred out of their species millions of years ago. This made them perfect for dangerous situations where others might panic. Velthar had walked into war zones, negotiated with hostile species, and never once felt his heart race with terror. Fear was something he understood only from books and reports. The assignment briefing had been simple. Spend 3 months aboard a human exploration vessel, observe their methods, report back on their procedures and decision-making processes. The Collective wanted to know if humans could be trusted with more responsibility. Some council members called humans too emotional, too unpredictable. Others said they showed promise. Velthar's job was to find the truth. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thud. Velthar picked up his single bag of belongings and walked toward the airlock. The doors opened with a hiss and warm air rushed out from the human ship. It smelled different than Quarian vessels. Less sterile, more alive somehow. A man stood waiting on the other side. He was perhaps 50 years old by human standards, with gray touching his temples and kind eyes that seemed to measure Velthar in a single glance. He wore a dark blue uniform with captain's insignia on the collar. "Commander Velthar, welcome aboard the Taijin. I'm Captain Hyun." The human extended his hand in the traditional human greeting. Velthar had studied this custom and grasped the offered hand firmly. The captain's grip was strong but not challenging. "I hope you'll feel at home here." "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate the opportunity to serve with your crew." Captain Hyun smiled and gestured down the corridor. "Let me show you around. Fair warning, we're a bit more casual than collective standard. My crew is professional, but they like to enjoy their work." As they walked through the ship, Velthar noted everything. The corridors were wider than necessary, painted in warm colors instead of standard gray. Photos and artwork hung on the walls. In one section, someone had painted a mural of Earth's ocean. The ship felt lived in, personal. They passed crew members in the halls. Each one greeted Captain Hyun with easy familiarity and welcomed Velthar with genuine curiosity. A young officer with bright eyes and a quick smile introduced himself as Lieutenant Jiho, the tactical officer. "If you need anything, Commander, just ask. We're happy to have you." In the engine room, they met Chief Engineer Mirai, a woman with oil-stained hands and sharp intelligence in her eyes. She was elbow-deep in a plasma conduit but paused to shake Velthar's hand. "Sorry about the mess. I'm upgrading our power distribution system. The manufacturer says it can't be done, but I disagree." She grinned at this, and Captain Hyun just shook his head with fondness. The medical bay was pristine and efficient. Dr. Borum, the chief medical officer, was a woman with calm confidence and gentle hands. She scanned Velthar with a medical tricorder and uploaded his biological data to the ship's systems. "Just in case," she explained. "I like to be prepared for all my patients. I hope I won't need to treat you, but if I do, I'll be ready." That evening, Captain Hyun invited Velthar to eat dinner with the senior staff. The mess hall was nothing like a Quarian dining facility, which was typically quiet and efficient. Here, a dozen crew members sat at long tables talking and laughing. Music played softly in the background. The smell of cooking food filled the air. Velthar sat between Lieutenant Jiho and Engineer Mirai. They served him something called bulgogi with rice and vegetables. The food was flavorful, much more complex than the nutrition packs Quarians typically consumed. "So, Commander," Jiho said, passing him a drink, "is it true that Quarians can't feel fear?" Velthar nodded. "It is true. My species evolved past that response. We found it inefficient." Mirai looked thoughtful. "That must make your job easier. Peacekeeping in dangerous places without being afraid." "It is practical," Velthar agreed, "though I confess I sometimes wonder what I am missing. Fear is a common trait among most species. It must serve some purpose." Captain Hyun, sitting across the table, spoke quietly. "Fear keeps us honest. It reminds us that what we're doing matters, that there are consequences." He smiled, but there was something serious in his eyes. "But I can see the advantage of not having it. The conversation flowed easily. The humans asked Velthar about his homeworld, his previous assignments, his impressions of their ship. They seemed genuinely interested in his answers. They also told stories about themselves, joking and teasing each other with the comfort of old friends. Velthar learned that Jiho had a wife and 2 children back on Earth. Mirai had grown up on a colony ship and had never lived on a planet. Dr. Borum had left a prestigious hospital to join the exploration service because she wanted to see the galaxy. Captain Hyun had been in space for 30 years and considered his crew his family. Over the next 3 weeks, Velthar settled into a routine. He observed the crew during their duties, noting their procedures and efficiency. The humans were competent, he had to admit. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs without constant communication. Their systems were well maintained, their protocols sound, but what struck him most was how they treated each other. They celebrated birthdays and personal achievements. When one crew member received bad news from home, others gathered to offer comfort. They shared meals, told stories, and created bonds that went beyond professional duty. Velthar found himself included in these moments. They asked his opinions, listened to his observations, and made him feel like part of the team rather than an outside observer. It was strange and oddly pleasant. On the 21st day of the mission, everything changed. Velthar was on the bridge during Alpha Shift, quietly monitoring the crew's activities. They were mapping a relatively empty sector of space, cataloging stellar phenomena and checking for signs of habitable planets. Routine work. Ensign Hana, who was monitoring communications, suddenly straightened in her seat. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress beacon. Bearing 27 Mark III. Captain Hyun turned to her station. "Origin?" "Unknown, sir. The signal is weak and distorted. It's coming from inside the Veil Nebula." Velthar knew about the Veil Nebula. It was largely unexplored, filled with dense gas clouds and electromagnetic interference that made navigation difficult. Most ships avoided it. Lieutenant Jiho pulled up the data on his screen. "The beacon is old, Captain. The signature doesn't match any known collective vessel. Could be ancient." Captain Hyun stood, his expression thoughtful. "How far inside the nebula?" "Approximately 6 hours at full speed, sir. Navigation will be tricky. Standard protocol was clear in situations like this. When encountering unknown distress signals in dangerous areas, a ship should report to collective command and wait for instructions. It was the logical, safe approach." Captain Hyun was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at his crew, at their eager faces, at the mystery waiting in the darkness. He smiled slightly, set a course for the beacon. "Full speed. Someone might need help." The crew moved instantly, their hands flying over controls. No one questioned the order. No one suggested waiting for backup. Velthar watched this and felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear, he couldn't feel that. But it was close, a sense that something important had just been set in motion. The Tajan turned toward the nebula and accelerated into the darkness. The nebula was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Velthar stood on the bridge of the Tajan, watching the viewing screen fill with swirling clouds of red and purple gas. Lightning arced between dense pockets of particles, creating dancing patterns in the darkness. It was like sailing into a storm made of stars. "Navigating this is going to be fun." Mirai's voice came through the comm system from engineering. She sounded excited rather than worried. "The electromagnetic interference is playing hell with our sensors, but I'm compensating." Captain Hyun sat in his command chair, calm and focused. "Take your time, Mirai. I'd rather get there slowly than not at all." Lieutenant Jiho monitored the tactical systems, his young face serious. "I'm picking up debris fields scattered throughout the area. Old ones by the look of it. Ships that didn't make it through." Velthar noted this information carefully. The humans showed no sign of reconsidering their course. They simply adjusted and continued forward. It was either brave or foolish, and he wasn't sure which. After 6 hours of careful navigation, they found the source of the distress beacon. It appeared on their screen suddenly, emerging from a dense gas cloud like a ghost. Velthar felt his analytical mind struggle to categorize what he was seeing. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Taijin. But its design was wrong. The hull seemed to be part biological, part mechanical, with sections that looked grown rather than built. Dark tendrils extended from various points, some severed and floating in space. The entire vessel had a dead skeletal appearance. What in the world is that? Jiho breathed. Dr. Borum had come to the bridge to see for herself. She stood next to Velthar, her face pale. It looks like a hybrid. Organic and technological combined. Captain Hyun leaned forward in his chair. Scan it, I want to know everything. Life signs, power readings, structural integrity. The bridge crew worked in silence for several minutes. Velthar watched the data scroll across the screens. What he saw made no sense according to collective records. No life signs detected, Jiho reported. But there are power signatures in the core of the ship. Minimal, like something in standby mode. The hull composition is unknown, another officer added. The computer can't match it to any registered species. Velthar accessed his own database through his neural implant. He searched through 200 years of collective knowledge looking for anything similar. Nothing matched exactly, but there were old legends, stories from before the collective was formed. Tales of a species that consumed others, that merged biology and technology in horrible ways. But those were just stories, myths to scare young cadets. I recommend caution, Captain, Velthar said. This vessel does not match any known configuration. Without proper analysis, boarding could be dangerous. Captain Hyun nodded. Noted, Commander. But that distress beacon is still transmitting. If there's even a chance someone is alive in there, we need to check. He stood and straightened his uniform. I'll lead a boarding party. Jiho Mirai, you're with me. Security Officer Day as well. Commander Velthar, I'd appreciate your expertise if you're willing to join us. Velthar considered the request. Logically, he should remain on the Taijin and observe from safety. But the humans had included him in their crew for 3 weeks, had treated him as one of their own. He found himself saying yes before he fully thought it through. 20 minutes later, Velthar stood in the shuttle bay wearing an environment suit. The humans moved around him, checking weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Jiho was making jokes to ease the tension, though Velthar noticed the young officer's hands checked his sidearm 3 times. Security Officer Day was a quiet man with steady eyes. He handed Velthar a weapon, just in case. It's set to stun. Point and press the trigger, simple. The shuttle ride to the derelict was short but strange. The massive ship seemed to grow larger as they approached, filling the windows with its alien architecture. Up close, Velthar could see that the hull was covered in patterns that looked almost like veins or roots. They docked at what appeared to be an airlock, though it took Mirai several minutes to interface with the strange technology. When the door finally opened, a rush of stale, cold air escaped into space. Atmosphere is present but thin, Mirai reported, checking her scanner. Breathable for humans and Quarians, but barely. Keep your suits sealed. They entered the derelict in a tight formation with Day at point and Captain Hyun in the center. Velthar stayed close to Mirai, recording everything with his suit's sensors. The interior of the ship was even stranger than the outside. The corridors were wide and irregular, with walls that seemed to pulse with faint light. The floor was uneven, made of a material that felt soft under their boots. Everything had an organic quality, as if they were walking through the inside of some enormous creature rather than a spacecraft. This is deeply wrong, Jiho muttered. His earlier humor was gone. I don't like this at all. They moved deeper into the ship, following a path toward the power signature Jiho had detected. The silence was oppressive, broken only by their breathing and footsteps. Several times Velthar saw movement at the edge of his vision, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there. After 30 minutes of searching, they found the holding chambers. The room was vast, filled with rows of cylindrical containers. Each container held something inside, preserved in a clear fluid. As Velthar approached the nearest one, his analytical mind cataloged what he saw with cold precision, even as something deeper recoiled. Inside the container was a being from a species he recognized. A Talvian, one of the collective's founding races, but it had been altered, changed in terrible ways. Parts of its body had been replaced with mechanical components. Other parts seemed to have been grown over with foreign biological matter. The creature's face was frozen in an expression of agony. Oh gods, Dr. Borum whispered. She moved from container to container, her medical training compelling her to examine each one despite the horror. These are experiments. Someone was testing ways to merge different species together, to combine biological and technological traits. Captain Hyun's voice was hard when he spoke. How many containers? At least 200 in this room alone, Day reported. He had found a console and was trying to access it. And the database suggests there are more rooms like this throughout the ship. Velthar forced himself to look at each container they passed. He recognized species from across the collective. Some were ancient races, others more recent members. All had been subjected to horrific procedures. Who would do this? Jiho asked. His weapon was raised now, his eyes scanning every shadow. Velthar accessed his database again, this time searching the oldest, most restricted files. What he found made him pause. There are legends, he said slowly, from before the collective. Stories of a species called the Devourers. They were said to consume other species, taking their biological advantages and technological knowledge. They were believed to be extinct, destroyed in a war thousands of years ago. Believed to be extinct, Captain Hyun repeated, but maybe not. Mirai had found another console and was downloading data. I'm getting schematics, research notes, everything. This will take time to analyze, but initial readings suggest the ship has been drifting for at least 500 years. Then it's safe? Jiho asked hopefully. Maybe. The power levels are minimal, barely enough to maintain life support and data storage. The ship appears to be in some kind of hibernation mode. Velthar was about to suggest they leave and report their findings when Mirai touched something on the console. A soft chime echoed through the chamber. Then another. Then a third. The lights in the room brightened. The walls began to pulse with stronger light. Throughout the ship, Velthar heard the sound of systems activating, of power flowing through long dormant circuits. What did you do? Day asked, his weapon raised. Mirai's face was pale behind her helmet. Nothing. I just accessed the database. But I think I triggered something. A security protocol, maybe. Captain Hyun's voice was calm but urgent. Everyone back to the shuttle, now. They turned and began moving quickly back the way they came. But the corridor had changed. Doors were sliding shut along their path. The walls seemed to be moving, shifting, reconfiguring. Then Velthar heard something that made his logical mind pause, a skittering sound like claws on metal, and it was coming from behind them. Run, Captain Hyun said, and the humans ran. Velthar ran with them, his long Quarian legs keeping pace. Behind them, the skittering grew louder, joined by other sounds. Clicking, hissing, the wet sound of something biological moving fast. Velthar glanced back once and saw them, creatures emerging from the walls, from hidden panels, from the darkness. They were the size of large dogs, with too many legs and bodies that seemed to be part insect, part machine. Their purpose was clear even at a glance. They were hunters designed to capture intruders. Lieutenant Jiho fired his weapon without breaking stride, and one of the creatures stumbled. But there were dozens more coming. The corridor ahead sealed itself with a heavy door dropping from the ceiling. Mirai reached it first and immediately began working on the control panel, her fingers flying over the strange interface. Day and Jiho positioned themselves behind her, weapons raised toward the approaching creatures. Velthar stood between them, his own weapon ready, but his mind racing. The creatures were closer now, and he could see them clearly in the pulsing light. They moved with terrible coordination, flowing around obstacles like water. Their bodies were a nightmare combination of metal and flesh, with sensors that glowed red in the darkness. Hurry, Mirai, Captain Hyun said. He was the calmest of all of them, standing beside his engineer with one hand on her shoulder. Not rushing her, just supporting her. I'm trying. This system is completely alien to me. It's like trying to read a language that doesn't exist. Mirai's voice was tight but steady. Her hands didn't shake even though the creatures were now 30 meters away. Jiho fired again. His shot hit one of the creatures in its center mass and it stumbled but didn't stop. They're adapting to our weapons. The shots are having less effect. Aim for the joints, Day suggested. He demonstrated by hitting one of the creatures where its mechanical legs joined its body. The legs sparked and gave out and the creature collapsed. The connection points are weaker. The team adjusted their fire. Velthar aimed carefully and squeezed the trigger. His shot was true, severing one creature's front leg. The logical part of his mind noted that Day's analysis was correct. But another part, a part he had never accessed before, noticed that his hands were perfectly steady. He felt no fear because he couldn't. For the first time in his life, he wondered if that was actually a disadvantage. The humans were afraid. He could see it in the way Jiho's jaw was clenched, in how Mirai's breathing had quickened, in the tightness around Captain Hyun's eyes. They were terrified. But they kept working, kept fighting, kept moving. The fear didn't stop them. It seemed to focus them. Got it, Mirai shouted. The door began to rise. Go, go, go! They ran through the opening. Day went last, firing 3 more shots to slow the pursuers. The door slammed shut behind them, and they heard the impact of creatures hitting the other side. The metal dented outward with each impact. That won't hold them long, Captain Hyun said. Keep moving. They ran through corridors that seemed to shift and change around them. The ship was fully awake now, and it was reconfiguring itself. New doors opened and closed. Walls moved. It was like running through a living maze that didn't want them to escape. Velthar's suit scanner showed they were still heading in the right direction, toward the docking port where their shuttle waited. But the path kept changing. What should have been a 10-minute run was becoming much longer. Captain, Jiho called out. I'm picking up movement ahead too. We're being surrounded. Alternate route, Captain Hyun said immediately. He pulled up a schematic on his suit display. There's a maintenance shaft 2 corridors over. It should lead to the docking level. They changed direction, moving through a series of smaller passages. These were narrower, barely wide enough for them to move single file. Velthar found himself in the middle of the group, with Mirai ahead of him and Dr. Borum behind. The maintenance shaft was a vertical tunnel with ladder rungs built into the wall. Captain Hyun went first, climbing quickly. One by one they followed. Velthar gripped the rungs and pulled himself up, his long arms making the climb easier than it was for the humans. They were halfway up when Velthar heard a sound below. He looked down and saw a creature entering the shaft. It climbed the walls like a spider, moving impossibly fast. Below us, he shouted. Dr. Borum was just below him. She looked down, saw the creature, and her face went pale. But she didn't freeze. She drew her weapon and fired down the shaft. Her first shot missed. Her second hit the creature but didn't slow it. Her third shot hit its sensor cluster and it fell back down the shaft with a screech. Nice shooting, Velthar said. I hate this, Dr. Borum replied, her voice shaking. I really hate this. They reached the top of the shaft and emerged onto the docking level. Their shuttle was visible 50 meters away, its lights a welcome beacon, but between them and safety were at least a dozen creatures spreading out in a semicircle. Formation, Captain Hyun ordered. The team moved into a tight group, weapons pointed outward. We fight our way through. Stay together. They moved forward as one unit. The creatures attacked from multiple directions, testing their defenses. The team fired in coordinated bursts, each person covering a different angle. It was like a dance they had practiced. Though Velthar knew they couldn't have trained for this exact situation, they were simply that synchronized. But there were too many creatures. For every one they disabled, 2 more appeared, and the team was running out of power for their weapons. That was when one of the creatures got through. It happened so fast that Velthar's enhanced perception barely caught it. A creature flanked wide and leaped over their defensive line. It landed on Velthar's back, its claws digging into his suit. He felt himself falling, heard the hiss of air as his suit was punctured. Then D was there. The security officer grabbed the creature and physically threw it off Velthar. The creature turned on Day immediately, its claws slashing. Day's suit tore open and Velthar saw blood. Day, no, Jiho shouted. But Day kept fighting. He drew a knife from his belt and drove it into the creature's sensor array. The creature spasmed and went still. Day kicked it away and turned to help Velthar up. Can you move? Day asked. Blood was spreading across his suit from multiple cuts. Yes. But you're injured. You need medical attention. Later. Move now. Dai pushed Velthar toward the shuttle. Captain Hyun had reached the shuttle and was holding the door open. Everyone in, now. They ran the last 20 meters. Mirai reached the shuttle first, then Jiho, then Dr. Borum. Velthar was next, with Day right behind him. But as Day reached the door, 3 creatures hit him from behind. He went down hard. Captain Hyun didn't hesitate. He jumped back out of the shuttle and grabbed Day's arm. Jiho was there a second later, adding his strength. Together they dragged Day inside as Dr. Borum fired past them, keeping the creatures back. Close the door, Captain Hyun yelled. The shuttle door sealed. Immediately, they felt the impact of creatures hitting the outside. The entire shuttle shook with their attempts to break in. Launch now, Captain Hyun ordered. Mirai was already at the controls. The shuttle's engines roared to life and they lifted off. Through the windows, Velthar saw creatures falling away as they accelerated. Within seconds, they were clear of the derelict ship and moving back toward the Tajan. Dr. Borum was on the floor with Day, her hands moving quickly over his injuries. Blood covered both of them. Velthar watched as she worked with desperate efficiency, her fear transformed into focused action. "Stay with me, Day," she said. "Don't you dare die on me." Day's face was pale, but he managed a weak smile. "Wouldn't dream of it, Doctor." Velthar looked at his own suit. The punctures weren't deep. His blue blood was leaking out slowly, but it wasn't life-threatening. He had supplies in his belt pack and quickly sealed the wounds with emergency patches. "How is he?" Captain Hyun asked, crouching beside Dr. Borum. "Bad. He needs surgery. I can stabilize him, but we need to get back to the Taijin's medical bay now." Jiho's voice came from the pilot seat, and it was shaking. "Captain, the derelict ship is moving. It's following us." Everyone turned to look out the window. The massive vessel was indeed moving, turning to track their shuttle. Lights were coming on all across its hull. After 500 years of sleep, it was fully awake. "Get us home fast," Captain Hyun said quietly. The shuttle raced through the nebula, dodging gas clouds and debris. Behind them, the derelict ship followed, gaining speed. It was bigger, faster, and clearly hostile. They reached the Taijin 8 minutes later. The shuttle bay doors opened, and they flew inside. The moment they landed, Dr. Borum and her medical team rushed Day away on a stretcher. Captain Hyun ran for the bridge. Jiho and Mirai went to their stations. Velthar followed Captain Hyun to the bridge, his mind trying to process everything that had happened. He had been in dangerous situations before. He had faced hostile forces and life-threatening circumstances. But always before, he had been calm, analytical, unafraid. Today, for the first time, he had seen what it meant to be afraid and act anyway. He had watched Day throw himself at a creature to save Velthar, even though Day was terrified. He had seen Mirai's hands shake while she worked to open doors, but she never stopped trying. He had heard the fear in Jiho's voice, but the young officer kept fighting, and Captain Hyun. The captain had gone back for a wounded crew member when the logical choice was to leave him and save the rest. No Quarian would have made that choice. The mathematics didn't support it. 1 life for 5 lives was not a good trade. But humans didn't calculate like that. They refused to leave anyone behind even when it was logical, even when they were terrified. On the bridge, alarms were screaming. The derelict ship was closing fast. The bridge of the Taijin was controlled chaos. Officers shouted reports from every station. Warning lights flashed red across multiple displays. The main view screen showed the derelict ship growing larger as it closed the distance between them. Captain Hyun dropped into his command chair and immediately started issuing orders. "Helm, get us out of this nebula. Best speed. Tactical, I want full scans of that ship. Find me its weaknesses. Engineering, how much power can you give me?" Mirai's voice came through the comm system. "I'm already pushing the engines past their rated capacity, Captain. I can give you another 10%, but we won't be able to maintain it for long." "Do it. Communications, start broadcasting a priority distress signal. Tell anyone who can hear us that we've encountered a hostile vessel of unknown origin." Ensign Hana shook her head. "The nebula is blocking long-range communications, sir. We need to get clear before anyone will hear us." Velthar stood at the back of the bridge, watching everything. The crew moved like parts of a single machine, each person knowing their role perfectly. But under their efficiency, he could sense the fear. It was in their quick movements, their tight voices, the way they kept glancing at the view screen. The derelict ship was impossibly fast. Despite the Taijin's best efforts, it was gaining. And as it came closer, its weapons came online. The screen showed energy building along its hull in patterns that looked organic, like veins filling with light. "Incoming fire," Jiho shouted. The Taijin shook as energy weapons struck its shields. The lights flickered. Another hit followed, then another. The shields were holding, but barely. "Return fire," Captain Hyun ordered. Jiho launched a spread of torpedoes. They struck the derelict ship's hull but seemed to do minimal damage. The strange biomechanical armor absorbed most of the impact. "Captain, our weapons aren't effective," Jiho reported. "That hull is too strong. Keep firing anyway. Make them work for it." For 20 minutes they ran. The Taijin dodged through the densest parts of the nebula, using the gas clouds for cover. Mirai performed miracles with the engines, squeezing out every bit of speed. But the derelict ship pursued them relentlessly, firing whenever it had a clear shot. Finally, they broke free of the nebula. The star field opened up before them, clear and beautiful. But so did their situation. "Communications are clear," Hana reported. "Broadcasting distress signal now. How long until the nearest collective ship can reach us? Captain Hyun asked. Hana checked her console and her face went pale. 3 days, sir. Maybe 4. The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The Taijin couldn't run for 3 days. Their shields would fail long before that. The ship would be destroyed or worse, captured. Options, Captain Hyun said calmly. Anyone, Jiho spoke up. We could try to lose them in another nebula, but there's nothing close enough. We'd be caught before we reached cover. We could surrender, Hana suggested quietly. Maybe negotiate. Captain Hyun shook his head. That ship isn't interested in negotiation. It's a predator. We saw what it does to the species it captures. Velthar found himself speaking. Captain, with respect, this is not a battle you can win. The logical action is to transmit all our data via probe and give the crew a chance to escape in the life pods. The collective needs to know about this threat. That's one option, Captain Hyun acknowledged. But that ship will still be out there. And in 2 weeks it will reach populated space. How many people will die before the collective mobilizes a response? Thousands at minimum, Velthar admitted. Possibly millions. But Captain, you cannot stop it. Your ship is outmatched. I know. Captain Hyun stood and walked to the view screen, staring at the pursuing vessel. But we can slow it down. Maybe even stop it if we're willing to pay the price. Velthar felt something cold settle in his chest. It wasn't fear, he couldn't feel that. But it was close. Understanding. Terrible understanding. You're planning to destroy it, Velthar said. I'm planning to try. Captain Hyun turned to his senior staff. We'll use ourselves as bait. Lead it back into the nebula. Into the densest region where the gas concentration is highest. Then we fire every torpedo we have in a coordinated pattern. The explosion should ignite the gas in a chain reaction. That will destroy both ships, Mirai said. She wasn't arguing, just stating fact. Yes. But the crew will evacuate in life pods first. The pods are shielded and can survive the blast if we get enough distance. It's not a good plan, but it's the only plan I see. Jiho ran the calculations on his screen. The odds of survival are less than 30%, Captain. Most of the crew won't make it. I know, but if we do nothing, millions of people die. I can't accept that. Captain Hyun looked around the bridge at his crew. I'm not ordering anyone to stay. This is volunteer only. Anyone who wants to can evacuate now, and I won't think less of them. No one moved. Captain, Mirai said. With all due respect, you're stuck with us. The next hour was the strangest of Velthar's long life. The crew prepared for their own deaths with calm efficiency. They recorded messages for their families. They checked and rechecked every system, making sure the plan would work perfectly. They helped each other with tasks and spoke in quiet voices about everything except their fear. Velthar found himself in the mess hall where off-duty crew members were gathering. Ensign Hana was there, sitting at a table and staring at a photo of her family on her datapad. She was very young, barely 20 years old by human standards. Ensign, Velthar said, may I sit? She nodded, not looking up from the photo. My parents are going to be so mad at me. I promised them I'd be safe out here. You could evacuate now. Take a life pod and get clear. No one would blame you. I know. But everyone else is staying. How can I run when they're going to stay and fight? She looked up at him with eyes that were wet with tears. I'm terrified, Commander. I'm so scared I can barely breathe. But I won't leave. Does that make sense? No, Velthar admitted. Logically, it makes no sense. But I'm beginning to understand that humans don't always operate on logic. Fear is weird, isn't it? Hana said. It tells you to run to save yourself. But sometimes the right thing to do is the thing you're most afraid of. My mom told me that once. She said courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing it anyway. Velthar thought about this. About Day throwing himself at a creature to save Velthar. About Captain Hyun going back for a wounded crew member. About this entire crew choosing to stay and fight when they could run. Your mother is wise, he said finally. Down in medical, Dr. Borum was fighting to save Day's life. She had been working for over an hour, her hands steady despite her exhaustion. Day was barely conscious, his breathing shallow. Doc, Day whispered, are we going to make it? Dr. Borum didn't lie to her patients. I don't know, but we're going to try. That's all anyone can do. I don't want to die, Day said simply. I know, neither do I. I'm scared too. She continued working, her hands moving with practiced precision. But I'm glad I'm here with this crew. If I have to face the end, I'd rather face it with people who care. On the bridge, Captain Hyun was finalizing the plan with Mirai and Jiho. They had calculated the exact point in the nebula where the gas was densest. They had programmed the torpedo patterns for maximum effect. They had set the evacuation timers to give the crew the best chance. "It should work," Jiho said. "If everything goes perfectly." "Nothing ever goes perfectly," Captain Hyun replied. "But we'll make it work anyway. That's what we do." Velthar returned to the bridge as they were beginning the final approach. The Tajan turned back toward the nebula, and the derelict ship followed, eager and hungry. It thought they were trying to hide again. It didn't understand what was really happening. "All hands, this is the captain." Hyun's voice echoed through the ship. "We are about to enter the nebula for our final approach. Crew evacuation will begin in 15 minutes. I want everyone in their assigned pods. Move quickly but stay calm. This is our last chance to stop this threat, and we're going to make it count. It has been my honor to serve with all of you." The crew began moving to evacuation stations. Velthar watched them go, seeing the fear in their faces mixed with determination. They were terrified, but they moved forward anyway. "Commander Velthar," Captain Hyun said, "you should evacuate with the others. There's a pod assigned to you." "And you, Captain? Will you be evacuating?" "I need to stay and pilot the ship until the last moment. Someone has to make sure we reach the right position. Then I will stay as well. You may need assistance." Captain Hyun looked at him with surprise. "Commander, you don't have to do this. This isn't your fight." Velthar considered this. The captain was right. He could leave. He should leave. Every logical calculation said he should evacuate and save himself. His death here would serve no purpose. But he thought about the past 3 weeks, about meals shared in the mess hall, about conversations and stories and moments of connection, about humans who included him, trusted him, treated him as one of their own. "With respect, Captain, you are wrong. This is my fight now. I choose to stand with you." Something passed between them in that moment, understanding, respect, perhaps even friendship. The Tajan plunged back into the nebula with the derelict ship following close behind. On the bridge, only 5 people remained. Captain Hyun at the helm, Lieutenant Jiho at tactical, Engineer Mirai monitoring systems, and Velthar standing beside them. Dr. Borum had insisted on staying with Day in medical, refusing to leave her patient. "Evacuation complete," Jiho reported. "All life pods have launched and are moving to minimum safe distance." "Good. Now we just need to reach the target zone." Captain Hyun's hands moved steadily over the controls, guiding the ship deeper into the nebula. The gas clouds grew thicker, pressing against their shields. Velthar watched the sensors showing the derelict ship behind them. It was so close, now close enough that he could see the details of its biomechanical hull. Energy was building along its weapons. One more hit might be enough to cripple the Tajan. "Incoming fire," Jiho called out. The ship shook violently. Sparks flew from one of the consoles. The lights dimmed, then stabilized at half brightness. "Shields down to 20%, Mirai reported. "We can't take another hit like that." "How much farther to the target zone?" Captain Hyun asked. 2 minutes at current speed. We might not have 2 minutes. Hyun made a decision. Transferring all power from shields to engines. Full emergency speed. "Captain, that leaves us completely unprotected," Jiho protested. "I know, but we need to reach that zone. It's our only chance." The Tajan surged forward, its engines screaming. Behind them, the derelict ship fired again. Without shields, the shot tore through the hull. Velthar felt the ship shudder. Alarms screamed. Atmosphere vented from multiple breaches. "Hull integrity failing," Mirai said. "We're venting air from decks 3 and 4. Emergency bulkheads will hold," Captain Hyun said. He didn't sound convinced. 1 more minute. Another shot hit them. This time, Velthar was thrown from his feet. He hit the deck hard and tasted blood. Around him, console exploded in showers of sparks. The bridge lights went out completely, replaced by dim emergency lighting. 30 seconds, Jiho called out. His console was barely functioning, but he kept working. Velthar pulled himself up. He saw Captain Hyun still at the helm, blood running down the side of his face from a cut above his eye. Mirai was slumped, over her console but still typing commands with shaking fingers. Jiho's arm hung at an odd angle, but his good hand stayed on the weapons controls. "Target zone reached," Hyun said. "Jiho, fire everything." Firing. The Taijin launched every torpedo in its arsenal. Dozens of weapons flew out in the precise pattern they had calculated. Each one was aimed at a specific point in the nebula where the gas was densest and most volatile. Torpedoes away, Jiho confirmed. Impact in 5 seconds. Everyone get to the emergency shuttle, Captain Hyun ordered. Now, they ran. Dr. Borum appeared from medical, supporting the barely conscious Day. They all rushed toward the small emergency shuttle located at the back of the bridge. It was meant for command staff in critical situations, a last resort escape option. Velthar reached the shuttle first and held the door open. Mireille and Jiho climbed in. Dr. Borum and Day followed. Captain Hyun was last, his hands still working controls even as he backed toward the shuttle. "Captain!" Velthar shouted. "Come on!" The first torpedo hit, then the second, then all the others in rapid succession. The gas in the nebula ignited in a massive chain reaction. Fire bloomed in space, spreading outward in waves of superheated plasma. The blast wave caught the derelict ship first. Velthar saw it through the shuttle's small window. The massive vessel was consumed by fire, its biomechanical hull burning. It tried to turn, tried to run, but the explosion was too fast, too big. The ship came apart, torn into pieces by forces it couldn't resist. Then the blast wave hit the Taijin. The main ship disintegrated. Metal screamed. The structure that had been their home for 3 weeks was ripped apart in seconds, but the emergency shuttle was built to survive. Its reinforced hull and shields held against the worst of the blast. They were thrown violently through space, tumbling end over end. Inside, everyone was pressed against their seats by crushing force. Velthar's vision went gray, then black. When he came to, everything was quiet. The shuttle was drifting, its emergency lights casting a red glow through the small cabin. Around him, the others were slowly waking. "Is everyone alive?" Captain Hyun asked. His voice was rough but steady. One by one they answered. Bruised, battered, but alive. Mireille checked the shuttle systems. "We're intact. Life support is functioning. Communications are damaged, but the distress beacon is still broadcasting." "The derelict ship?" Velthar asked. Jiho looked at the sensors with his good hand. He smiled, though it clearly hurt. "Gone. Completely destroyed. We did it." They sat in silence for a moment, processing what they had accomplished. They had destroyed a threat that could have killed millions. They had saved countless lives, and they had survived. Over the next 6 days, they drifted in the shuttle. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but they were together. Dr. Borum tended everyone's injuries as best she could with limited supplies. Day slowly improved, his strength returning day by day. They told stories to pass the time. Captain Hyun talked about his first command and the mistakes he had made. Jiho shared memories of his children. Mireille explained how she had learned engineering from her mother on a colony ship. Dr. Borum spoke about the patients she had saved and the ones she had lost. Velthar listened to all of it, learning more about humans in those 6 days than he had in 3 weeks aboard the Taijin. He learned about their hopes and fears, their dreams and regrets. He learned that they valued connections above logic, relationships above efficiency. And slowly he began to understand something profound. Fear wasn't weakness. It was a reminder that things mattered, that people mattered. Without fear, there could be no courage. Without the possibility of loss, there could be no real choice. On the 6th day, a collective rescue ship found them. The life pods that had evacuated earlier were also recovered. Of the Taijin's crew of 80, 63 had survived. The losses hurt, but they could have been so much worse. Velthar was taken to a medical facility for treatment. His injuries were not severe and he recovered quickly. But while his body healed, his mind continued to process everything he had experienced. 3 weeks after the rescue, he was called to testify before the collective council. He stood in the great hall where representatives from hundreds of species gathered to make decisions that affected trillions of lives. He gave his report in the traditional Quarian manner, factual and precise. But at the end, he added something personal. Something a Quarian had never said before in this hall. I recommend that humanity be granted full strategic partnership in the collective, Velthar said. I recommend that human officers be integrated into our defense forces at all levels. I make this recommendation not despite their fear, but because of it. The hall murmured with surprise. One of the senior council members, a being from an ancient species, spoke up. Explain, Commander. Your species considers fear to be inefficient. We were wrong, Velthar said simply. Fear is not inefficiency. It is awareness of cost. It is understanding that choices matter because outcomes matter. Humans feel fear constantly. They face mortality every day. And yet they act. They sacrifice. They stand for others even when logic says they should run. We have evolved past fear and called it progress. But we have lost something essential. We make choices without understanding their weight. We calculate odds without feeling the cost. Humans know fear, live with it, and overcome it. This makes them uniquely valuable. I have served in the collective for 200 years, Velthar continued. I have never been afraid because my species cannot feel fear. But standing beside humans, I encountered fear like never before. Not my own, but theirs. And in watching them face their fear and act anyway, I learned what courage truly means. The debate lasted for weeks. Some council members agreed with Velthar. Others argued that humans were too emotional, too unpredictable. But eventually, a decision was made. Humans would be given expanded roles in collective operations. Their methods would be studied. Their approach to fear and courage would be valued. Velthar requested and received a transfer to human fleet operations. He was assigned as first officer aboard a new ship, the HSS Hyunwoo, commanded by the newly promoted Captain Jiho. On the day he reported for duty, Jiho met him at the airlock with a wide smile. Commander Velthar, welcome aboard. Ready for another adventure? Velthar looked around the bridge of the new ship. The crew was mixed, humans and other species learning to work together. He saw the same warmth and connection he had observed on the Taejin, the same willingness to face danger together. Captain Jiho, Velthar said, I must confess something. Being around humans has changed me. I still cannot feel fear the way you do, but I have learned to recognize it in others, to respect it. And sometimes, when I am with your people facing danger, I feel something close to fear, an understanding of what might be lost. Jiho's smile softened. That's called caring, Commander. Welcome to the human condition. Is it always this uncomfortable? Velthar asked. Usually, but it's worth it. Jiho gestured to the view screen where stars waited beyond the station. Now shall we see what trouble we can find? Velthar took his position at the first officer's station.